Angelica Spurb.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Spurbs Herbs, episode 71, Ba Ji Tian, or Morinda officinalis radix, or Morinda root. Without further ado, let's get into it. So today's episode, today we will be exploring another single Chinese herb, Ba Ji Tian, or Morinda root, Morinda officinalis radix in Latin. This is a yang tonifying herb which can also strengthen the sinews and expel wind dampness. As usual, we will explore all the intricacies of this herb as well as an explanation of its category. And as always, we will look at something a little different. We are going to look at why, not how, herbs work by examining coherent coupling and plant-human coalitions. Talk about something a little different. Please join us for another fascinating and useful episode. But before we get into that, did you know that I have written a couple of books? First book is Integrative Pharmacology, combining modern pharmacology with integrative medicine. This is a pretty thorough book discussing pharmaceuticals, what they are used for and how they work, and how they may interact with other drugs, herbs, and supplements. It is the perfect reference book for all acupuncturists, herbalists, chiropractors, naturopaths, and really any integrative practitioner. But it is also perfect for anyone. It goes in depth, but it is easy to read and has difficult terminology bolded with definitions on the same page. It is not only a great book explaining pharmaceuticals, it is also available at an amazing price. It is available for 10% off its regular price, and you get it signed by me, the author, for just $67.45. My second book, written with an amazing insurance expert, Tiffany Anderson Hefner, is called Playing the Game, Step-by-Step Approach to Accepting Insurance as an Acupuncturist. Here it says, this is the perfect book for any acupuncturist who wants to or is contemplating accepting insurance. Let me tell you why I wrote the book. A lot of people write books because they feel they're experts and they want to pass on their knowledge. I often write books because, not always, but often, and this is the case here, I write books because I don't feel I had enough knowledge in an area and I wanted to learn. And so while I'm learning, there's no better way to learn in my book than to write a book. So that's why I did it. I learned a ton. This is how I got into insurance billing. It gives step-by-step advice at every part of the insurance game, from getting set up through the patient encounter and, of course, getting paid. All in easy-to-digest language, honest advice, and lots of hand-holding through the process. And you guessed it, it also is 10% off and signed by one of the authors, me, all for $26.98. You can get either or both of these books at the shop at www.spurbsherbs.com. That's www.spurbsherbs.com, SPERBSHERBS.com. So let's talk about why, not how, herbs work. So I have several dozen, actually, if you include all the podcasts, I have over 100 different webinars recorded and available online. My favorite one is probably Why, Not How Herbs Work. It combines science, philosophy, and prognostication into this super interesting and very exciting theory about why herbs work on humans at all. I mean, why do they work at all on us? If you think about it for a second, it's like, okay, we just take for granted that herbs work on us, but why? Why would they work? Why ingesting these would have a function? Well, that's what this talks about. And today I want to talk about two concepts from this course. There's several more concepts. These are the two I chose to talk about today. Coherent coupling and plant-human coalitions. So coherent coupling. So one of neo-Darwinism's central tenets is that mutations in organisms happen randomly. So, you're not familiar with Darwin. Darwin, of course, wrote on what am I totally blanking on the term of its Origin of Species. That's what it is, on the Origin of Species. And basically established evolution as an important concept in biology. With some revision, it's now called neo-Darwinism. And the idea is that mutations happen randomly. And then, as we're going to see, when they happen randomly, they're only conserved. They only stay if it gives an advantage to the individual that had the mutation. Otherwise, often if it's a bad mutation, the animal will die early. It won't pass on the gene. That's the idea. So they're happening randomly all the time, but only the ones that actually do something good stick around. But what if they didn't happen randomly? What if there was actually a non-random mutations happening? And this concept is called coherent coupling. According to Varela, Thompson, and Roche, the construct of coherent coupling dictates that organism and environment are mutually enfolded in multiple ways. And what constitutes the world of a given organism is enacted by that organism's history of coupling with its environment. This is interesting. Stay with me here. In other words, coherent coupling states that mutations may be adaptive rather than random. In other words, instead of having a random mutation and only keeping those that are adaptive, what we're saying is the mutation was not random, but was adaptive to begin with because of these influences. So this is in contrast to mutations being random and only conserved if adaptive. So that's my bullet point here. So I repeated myself. This can involve not only changes in DNA and genes, but can encompass epigenetics. Now, we had a whole something different on epigenetics several episodes ago. So you want to go back and remind yourself about, get a little bit more in depth in epigenetics. But epigenetics, so the idea that sort of the concept around epigenetics is, yeah, we have these DNA and genes, but just because we have these genes and DNA doesn't mean we're activating them and actually producing proteins and biological function from these DNA and genes, that there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on that may activate, deactivate, increase activation, decrease activation of these particular DNA and genes. And that whole study is called epigenetics. Coherent coupling is not about an organism conforming to its environment, which would be relatively standard evolution. Instead, it is saying the environment and the organisms within it are so inherently coupled that they change each other through mutually affecting relationships. Ultimately, the idea that the coupling of organisms with a high capacity for adaptation goes beyond response to the physico-chemical dimension. The fluidity of morphological or shape, physiological function, and psychological plasticity or change of an organism firmly embeds that organism with its surroundings, creating a dynamic response to perturbations. In other words, something changes the environment and just automatically the organism changes because the environment has changed. In other words, because they're so tightly bound. Put simply, the phenotype, or what it looks like, depends to a significant degree on the environment, and this is a necessary condition for integrating the developing organism into its particular habitat. So this is a really interesting concept. That is the concept of coherent coupling. It's a theory. I think we could find some evidence for it. I don't know if it's wholesale accepted or not, but it's an interesting, really interesting theory. So the next theory we're going to talk about are plant-human coalitions. As we discuss these concepts, there needs to be some sort of exchange of information in order to maintain the relationships within and between the systems. This is called informational flow and include many types of information, though most commonly this takes the basic form of chemistry in the form of molecular messaging. Metabolites of plants are well known to modulate the relations, both positive attractant and negative repellent, among plants and their consumers. The presence of secondary compounds in plants provides information to other species, and due to a reiterative history, a repeatable history, repeating history of interactions, generates a mutually enfolding between plants and humans. Plants have always provided shelter, clothing, food, and medicine for humans. In turn, humans and animals transport, seed, cultivate with metabolic waste, fertilize plants. So So there's this plant-human coalition happening because of all this. Hominins, which not only includes humans, but the proto-humans, like Neanderthals and things along those lines. Hominins have had 5 to 6 million years of exposure to phytochemistry, or the chemistry from plants. There were an estimated 80 to 220 plants in the early human diet, which translates to 80 to 220,000 phytochemicals. So in other words, about 1,000 phytochemicals in each plant. If humans have coherently coupled with plants, this means that plants have shaped humans and humans have shaped plants through this informational exchange. Expanding on this, it means that both human and plant DNA, RNA, and proteins and epigenetic expression have changed in response to each other's influence. It is easy to see how humans have affected plants through cultivation and crop manipulation. Plants have also profoundly shaped humans. One example of this is cytochrome P450, or CYP. Now, we're going to talk about cytochrome P450 at the end of this. I talk about it at all of my SPURBs herbs in terms of drug-herb interactions, whether there are or are not cytochrome P450 interactions. So I discuss these a lot when discussing drug-herb interactions. This system, the cytochrome P450 system, or CYP system, and they are metabolism proteins. In other words, they translate a chemical, they metabolize a chemical from one chemical to a different chemical. Cytochrome P450 can rapidly be more or less expressed or changed in response to ingested compounds. It is theorized that we have a large diversity of cytochrome P450 genes due to the interaction and the need to detoxify plant compounds. So this is where we get into the plant-human coalitions. Because there are so many different plant compounds, we've come up with a whole bunch of different cytochrome P450 genes to deal with those different plant compounds. In other words, when there's fewer, we have less, and as there are more plant compounds, so this is that plant-human coalition. We're affecting each other. Another very interesting potential support for these coalitions involves phytoestrogens. Now, I have to tell you, I'm not a huge believer in this, but we'll talk about it in just a second. So I love the theory. The theory is really interesting. This theory postulates that plants chosen for domestication may have higher numbers of phytoestrogens. Because of these higher levels of phytoestrogens, the ovulatory cycle in women is enhanced and there are more births. With more humans, more plants can be cultivated as well as needed as a food source. And then it spirals. So you get more humans with more enhanced ovulatory cycles, with more births and more planting. So there's this mutual enhancement that's happening with this. And the reason why I wonder about that is I've looked into phytoestrogens at this point. I'm not sure phytoestrogens. So phytoestrogens are estrogens that are in plants. I'm not sure they actually do anything in the body. Research I've shown says they don't. At least of the several different species of plants that are supposed to be high in phytoestrogens, the studies of those have shown that they don't do anything to estrogen levels in the body. It's not to say they don't do something though, and just because in phytoestrogens don't necessarily, we say estrogen like it's one chemical, but there's like a whole bunch of chemicals that are considered estrogens. So it can get really complicated really fast. So I don't want to say, I say I'm a little skeptical, but I'm not against this idea. And it certainly is a fascinating idea. Think about this. Like you eat a plant, that makes us as humans have more births. And because we have more births, we plant more of the plant. So what a great way for the plant to get stronger and more and survive more and select for those phytoestrogens. Fascinating concept. So with this as a quick introduction to why herbs may act on humans, let's get into today's herb. Today's herb is Baji Tian, or Morinda root. Its family is this species is in the Rubiaceae or rose family. Excuse me, it is not the rose family. It is the madder family. The madder family. The species is Morinda officinalis Howe, H-O-W. That indicates the botanist who first categorized it. The medicinal part is the root. And the English translation, Baji Tian, simply means Morinda root. Baji is Morinda and Tian is root. Other names, and so I'm I'm a little cautious in saying these two first other names. So one other name is Indian mulberry and another one is noni. And I don't think this is either of those. I think that was a mistake. Several websites had those as other names, but when I looked into it, there's a different Morinda species, Morinda calcina or something along those lines, and that's noni, also known as Indian mulberry. This Morinda officinalis is not noni, is not Indian mulberry, but it may still be called that in certain situations. So I'm a little skeptical about those first two other names, though people are saying that. This is also known in Chinese as Biji or Baji, Ji Chang Feng, Ji Yang Tang. In Japanese, again, I can't pronounce Japanese or Korean. In Japanese, Hage Kaiten, and in Korean, Paguchian. So yeah, those are other names. Now, remember, in single herbs, we have three main textbooks, and we bring in several other textbooks in certain sections. The first one is Bensky and his team, and they say the dosage on this herb is 6 to 15 grams. Chen and Chen is another one of our textbooks, and Brandon Wiseman is our third textbook. These two both say the dose is 10 to 15 grams rather than 6 to 15 grams. Let's talk about this Rubiaceae family, or Madder family. It consists of 611 genera and over 13,150 species. So it's certainly not a small family. I've seen larger, but that's a good sized family. They are herbs, shrubs, and trees, mostly in tropical areas, though we'll see they're in other areas too. They have opposing leaves with stipules or in whorls, with unbroken leaf margins and leaf-like appendages at the base of the leaf stalks. The leaves usually are large and evergreen in tropical species, deciduous in temperate species, and needle-like or scale-like in desert species. The plants may bear a single fruit or many small flowers clustered together. The fruits can be berries, drupes, capsules, or schizocarps, or dry fruits that split into segments of a single seed. Coffee, quinine, ipecac, kratom, which is a really controversial herb right now, and gambier used in tannin, all come from or are extracts from members of this family. Many are also common ornamentals, so you might see these in gardens and what have you as ornamentals. So there you go. The category, going back to the herb, Bajitian, the category, according to Bensky, they put this herb in the herbs that tonify the yang subcategory under tonifying herbs category. Chen Chen say it is in the yang tonifying herbs subcategory of tonic herbs. And Brandon Wiseman say it is a yang supplementing medicinal under the supplementing medicinals category. So they're all in agreement, just slightly different translational aspects to that. Bensky and his team say it is acrid and sweet and slightly warm temperature and enters the kidney channel. Chen Chen completely agrees with that. So acrid, sweet, slightly warm temperature enters the kidney channel. However, Brandon Wiseman add the liver channel. It enters the liver channel as well as the kidney channel. So 2 out of 3 agree, which is, honestly, if there's 2 out of 3 that agree, it's usually Chen Chen and Brandon Wiseman. The fact that Chen Chen and Bensky both agree, that's an interesting agreement. History, both Bensky and their team and Chen Chen say the original source for this herb is the Shendong Ben Sao Jing, or the Divine Husbandman's Classic of the Materia Medica, which is the first, we mentioned this a lot, it's the first existing book on single herbs, and that was written in the 2nd century CE. So very interesting text. We do have translations. You'll see I quote it here, so that's another source for us today. So as usual, we're going to talk about the herbs themselves, the categories first. So we're going to talk about the category of tonifying herbs, and then we're going to talk about the subcategory of tonifying yang herbs. Both of these are going to be mostly, I think, almost entirely from Bensky, and they have great introductions to these different categories and subcategories. So we discussed herbs that tonify yang in episode 59, Gusu gu sui bu, and we repeat that information here. So if you've heard that episode, this is going to be the same thing. So according to Bensky and their team, tonifying herbs, also called tonics, are those which strengthen or supplement an area or physiological process of the body that is weakened or insufficient. They also strengthen the body's defenses against disease. Clinically, they are used in combination with herbs that expel external pathogenic influences for disorders in which the pathogenic influence is strong and the normal qi is weak, a strategy called supporting the normal and expelling the pathogenic, or Fuzhong Chu Xie. These herbs assist in the recovery of those who have been ill with chronic or degenerative disorders by strengthening the various physiological processes of the body and supplementing substances which are depleted. Tonics are used in treating patterns of deficiency of the qi, blood, yin, and yang. It's important to remember that in the clinic, depending on the patient's presentation, the herbs are often combined. For example, a patient with yang deficiency usually suffers from qi deficiency as well, and the same process may also involve yin deficiency. Moreover, patterns of qi deficiency may evolve into yang deficiency. The practitioner must therefore be flexible when using these herbs. A few words of caution should be made with regard to tonics. It is important to remember that herbs are only one part of the healing process. There is a tendency to suggest to debilitated patients that taking a tonic is all that is needed for recovery. This is not true. Physical and breathing exercises and diet are also important, and of course, sufficient rest. What is more, tonifying herbs strengthen the process of the body, including pathogenic processes such as those associated with external pathogenic influences. Thus, unless they are combined with herbs that release the exterior, tonifying herbs should not be prescribed in cases where there are still signs of an exterior disorder. If they are, the exterior disorder will linger on. The practitioner should also be aware of a condition referred to as deficient yet unable to accept tonification, or shu bu shou bu. This refers to an individual, and again, I apologize, I don't have the toe marks, so that was my best guess. I was trying to do it without toe marks. So this refers to an individual who regularly develops problems after taking tonics. The most common are digestive problems such as nausea, bloating, or loss of appetite. Signs of fire from deficiency, including dry mouth and lips, irritability, and insomnia, can also appear. These problems are usually due to underlying stagnation, which must be dealt with before tonification can be successful. In addition, if a tonic is given to a patient who is not primarily deficient, a wide range of problems can occur, including indigestion, rashes, and irritability. So that is a brief introduction to tonifying herbs. Let's get into the subcategory herbs that tonify the yang. The herbs in this section are used for patterns of yang deficiency, primarily of the kidneys, spleen, and heart, which underlies the qi transforming functions of the body. They are also known as herbs that assist the yang, or zhu yang. Because the kidneys are the seat of the primal yang, the basis of all the body is yang, the most important use of this class of herbs is to tonify the kidney yang. The principal manifestations of kidney yang deficiency is systemic exhaustion and lack of warmth. The most common associated symptoms are withdrawal into oneself, fear of cold, cold extremities, sore and weak lower back and lower extremities, pale tongue, and a deep, weak pulse. Other related problems include impotence, spermatorrhea, watery vaginal discharge, infertility, enuresis, which is I'm totally blanking. Polyuria, which is too much excessive urination, wheezing, and daybreak diarrhea, which is very interesting in Chinese medicine. Daybreak diarrhea basically means you wake up due to diarrhea. The first thing you have to do is go have a very loose stool. And it can wake you up, daybreak diarrhea. So that is a quick introduction to herbs that tonify the yang. Let's talk about good quality Baji Tian. So Bensky say good quality consists of thick roots with a thick purple, fleshy, annulated, and sweet cortex and thin xylem. They also say a variety of names have been coined to emphasize certain desirable qualities in this herb, such as Morinda flesh, Baji Ro, or fat Morinda, Fei Baji, after the high quality, large, fleshy roots. The cultivated product is said to be of better quality than the wild crafted product. And the best quality comes from Gaoyao, Deqing, and Yunnan in Guangdong province. In Chinese Medicinal Identification, an Illustrated Approach, which is a great book that is really about quality of herbs, Zhao and Chen say superior medicinal material is fat and strong, continuously linked, and has thick flesh with a purplish color. So very similar to what Bensky and his team just said. They have a flattened cylindrical shape, slightly curved, irregular in length, and are externally grayish yellow or dark gray in color with a pliable texture. It is odorless, and the taste is sweet and slightly astringent. So that's good quality. Let's talk about what it does, what its Chinese medical actions are. So according to Bensky and his team, Baji Tian tonifies the kidneys and fortifies the yang. For patterns of kidney yang deficiency with such symptoms as impotence, male or female infertility, premature ejaculation, urinary frequency, incontinence of urine, irregular menstruation, cold and painful lower abdomen, and a weak or sore back. It also disperses wind dampness and strengthens the sinews and bones. We're going to see that that's an important distinction from other yang tonics. Chen and Chen say it tonifies the kidney and assists the yang. It also strengthens sinews and bones, treats Bijang or painful obstruction syndrome. So Bijang is an interesting category of disorders in Chinese medicine, which can include a lot of the different kinds of arthritis that we may do, but other things as well. So I like what always kind of pops in my head is the old rheumatiz. That would be kind of Bijang, or at least one aspect of Bijang. So Brandon Wiseman say it supplements the kidney yang. So that's pretty universal. Everyone is saying it helps kidney yang. It is used to treat vacuity cold of the lower origin with cold pain in the lesser abdomen or menstrual irregularities and impotence. They also say, as all the others, it also strengthens the sinew and bone and dispels wind damp. Zhao and Chen, that's the Chinese Medicinal Identification book. They also have functions in it as well. And they say it supplements the kidney, invigorates yang, strengthens the sinews and bones, and dispels wind dampness. And here I said we are going to look a little bit at the Defined Farmers Materia Medica, or the Bensao. Am I totally blanking? Shennong Bensao Jing. The Shennong Bensao Jing. As I throw my glasses everywhere, which is not a good thing. Let me put it back there. Okay, the Shennong Bensao Jing. The Divine Farmers Materia Medica says it is a superior class herb, and it mainly treats great wind evil qi and impotence, fortifies the sinews and bones, quiets the five viscera, supplements the center, improves the will, and boosts the qi. So, the superior class herb is an interesting one. That means it's relatively safe, and that it actually is can be taken for long term and almost as a food. So that's an interesting, because a lot of these yang tonics, I would think, wouldn't necessarily be superior class, because you take them for too long and they can be dry and they can be all sorts of stuff. So the fact that it classifies it back then as a superior class herb is interesting to me. Okay. Preparations. How do we prepare this herb? Bensky and his team has a couple of entries on this herb's preparation. Without further preparation, this herb tonifies the kidney yang and also expels wind dampness. Is best in its unprepared form when treating wind damp painful obstruction with concurrent kidney yang deficiency. So that's just using it straight. Salt prepared morinda or yinbaji. The root is mixed with salt water, then thoroughly steamed, which facilitates the removal of the heartwood. It is then sliced into sections and dried in the sun. This method of preparation enhances its ability to enter the kidney channel. While it augments the primal yang, it also replenishes yin water and is thus appropriate for the treatment of impotence or spermatorrhea due to the depletion of kidney essence or kidney qing. So that's an interesting function of this. Processed morinda or zhibaiji. The roots are boiled together with Glyceris radix gansao, that's licorice, till soft. Then the heartwood is removed while the roots are still hot. Once cooled but still moist, they are cut into sections and dried. This method of preparation is traditionally considered to moderate its nature so that it tonifies fire but does not unduly dry yin, and so is quite popular. Chen Chen say the unprocessed herb is commonly used to warm the yang of the kidney, spleen, and stomach. Frying it with salt increases its warmth but not its drying influence. Thus, it more strongly tonifies the kidney and strengthens the muscles and tendons. Long-term use of the salt-fried herb is also effective for treating premature ejaculation and incontinence caused by yang deficiency. So there you go. So even different preparation there. So, I always look at Western uses, is the Chinese herb used in the West? And it appears this herb is primarily a Chinese herb, and it was difficult to find any Western herbal entries for this herb. One of the big books I use, I don't know if it's the best book to use, but one of the big books I use to look at Western uses is the PDR for Herbal Medicines. It's a giant book. PDR refers to the physician's desk reference, so it is geared towards physicians a little bit. And it doesn't mention this herb at all. So, and I even looked up Indian mulberry, and that was one of the reasons why I don't think it's this species. So I couldn't find anything on the Western use of this herb. Sometimes there are Western uses, or ginseng's a great example of that, used very much in Chinese medicine as well as in Western medicine, Western herbology as well. So as usual, Bensky has an excellent commentary on this herb. So let's get into that. Sweet and warm such that it tonifies, but acrid and warm such that it disperses. Baji Tian enters the kidney channel to warm the kidney yang, augment the essence, fortify the sinews and bones, and disperse wind, cold, and dampness. Yet its nature is soft and moistening, so that while it is warm, it is not overly drying, and its tonification is not cloying. In addition, as a tonic, it is rather modest, and is also considered to have a minor action in augmenting the blood. It is typically used with similar herbs for such problems as impotence due to kidney yang deficiency, infertility, irregular menstruation, and abdominal pain due to cold in the womb, and pain in the lower back and knees due to invasion of pathogenic wind dampness, taking advantage of kidney yang deficiency. Encountering the sources of the classic of Materia Medica, or the Benjing Feng Yuan, written in 1670, notes that this herb does not wither in the winter. It is an herb of the kidney channel blood level and of the penetrating vessel. Its nature both tonifies the primal yang and disperses pathogens. When the primal is tonified, how can a pathogen linger? Seeking accuracy in the Materia Medica, the Bensao Qiu Zhen, written in 1773, observes that, according to the books, it is an important herb for kidney tonification because it is moist in nature. However, with an acrid, warm flavor, it also expels wind and dampness, so it is even better for symptoms such as pain in the lower back and knees, wind qi, leg qi, and edema. The Grand Materia Medica confirms that it treats leg qi, expels wind illnesses, and tonifies the sea of blood. Sea of blood here refers to the penetrating vessel. So if you're not familiar with the penetrating vessel, this is considered one of the 8 extra vessels. So, we have our 12 classic channels, which are attached to, are paired with organs. So we have 12 organs and each one has a channel. Then we have 8 extra organs. The 2 that most people, if you know anything about Chinese medicine, know about are the Ren and Du channel, or the conception and governing channel, the Ren and the Du, which the conception channel, the Ren channel, goes down the front of the body, and the Du, or the governing channel, goes up the back in the center line. And then we have 6 other extra meridians as well that do various things. Penetrating vessel is one of those, and very, very useful, especially in menstrual issues. So that's hence the sea of blood here. All right, let's compare this herb. So Bensky compares this herb with 2 others. First of those herbs is Epimeti herba, or yin yang huo, and the second is Curculingus rhizoma, or xian mao. And we're going to compare all 3 of them at once. All 3 herbs reinforce the yin yang, strengthen the sinews and bones, and expel wind dampness, and are thus often combined to treat these disorders. However, Baji Tian is acrid, sweet, and only slightly warming, with a soft moistening quality. It tonifies the yang without being overly dry or cloying. It also augments the essence. There's not a lot of herbs that augment the essence. There's animal products that do, but there's not a ton of herbs that augment the essence, and this is one of them. Epimeti herba, or yin yang huo, is warmer and more markedly tonifies the fire at the gate of vitality, while strongly dispersing wind dampness and unblocking painful obstruction. Curculiginous rhizoma, or xian mao, is the hottest and most acrid herb in the group, with a harsh nature that strongly expels cold dampness, but its slight toxicity makes it appropriate for only short-term use. Chen also comments on this herb: the yang tonifying function of Baji Tian is not as strong as that of yin yang huo, or herba epimeti, which we just mentioned, or Lu Rong, Cornucervi panthotrichum. So Lu Rong, or Cornucervi panthotrichum, is actually, I think it's the velvet from deer antlers, and not, if you can find it, it's very expensive, and I think we should probably avoid it. I think it's not exactly, it's pretty cruel, my understanding, to the deer. So generally I would stay away from Lu Rong. But Lu Rong is considered a very potent yang tonifying herb. However, it also has, so this is going back to Baji Tian. However, it also has a nourishing function to tonify jing, or essence, and blood, which prevents other herbs from creating deficient fire in the body. So that's good. So what we hear over and over again about Baji Tian is that it is, it's not the warmest of the yang tonics. It warms, but it's not super strong in its warming. But what's nice about it is it's not super drying, and it kind of protects, to a certain extent, a little bit of the yin as well. So it's a relatively mild herb for yang tonifying, but a safe herb for yang tonifying. Combinations. So Bensky et al. Combines this herb with one other, at least that's what they talk about, and that's with Sistanches herba, or Ro Sangrong. Both herbs tonify the yin yang and are special in that neither is overly drying. Sistanches herba, Ro Sangrong, is particularly moistening, and within its ability to tonify the yang is the capacity to augment the essence and moisten the intestines. Baji Tian is not moistening as such, but is less drying than other yin yang tonics, and its gentle, acrid flavor moderates the potential for cloying that exists in Sistanches herba, Ro Sangrong. Hence, this is an excellent combination for tonifying the yang without injuring the yin, and can also be used for constipation in the elderly by increasing the doses of Sistanches herba, Ro Sangrong. So that's a great combination. And notice that it's used in the elderly, which makes sense, because as we start talking about yang deficiency and yin vacuity, yang and yin vacuity, generally that will affect us as we grow older, so as we become elderly. So And then, of course, constipation is quite common as well in the elderly. So this is a great combination for both of those. Contents of this herb, according to Bensky, include anthraquinones, iridoids, and other constituents, including palmitic acid, nonadecane, beta-sitosterol, which we've mentioned before is common in herbs and has a lot of variety of potentially beneficial effects. 24-ethyl cholesterol and glucose and mannose. And here's another study by Zhang and his team, her team. Oligosaccharides are another prominent constituents and are said to help promote serotonin production in the brain and may be effective in treating depression. This is a really interesting study, which I didn't get into in too much depth. We have a few minutes here. So it actually compared the oligosaccharides of Bajitian. So they actually extract the oligosaccharides from Bajitian and use them as an antidepressant in China, apparently, according to this article. And they compared them with other antidepressants. If you're on an antidepressant, they looking over them, they all seem to be in the SSRI, maybe SNRI categories, so selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or maybe serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. These are kind of the standard, modern, latest maybe not the latest, but relatively recent antidepressants with relatively fewer side effects as the older antidepressants. So those are good comparisons. And they actually found that these oligosaccharides of Bajitian were just as effective in treating depression as those drugs were as well. And we can see why, if it helps promote serotonin production. So one of the theories of depression is that there's not enough serotonin in certain parts of the brain. And so if you can increase production, you can overcome that, and so it could help depression. So it was interesting. I didn't assess the study very much, so I'm not saying it was a strong study or a weak study. I was more interested at that point looking at the contents, and had a good thing on contents here. So, but it's an interesting study to think about as well. So depression is actually one of the science. We're going to see what this can do according to the science as well. And we're going to do that right now. So according to Zhang et al., which is a different Zhang in a different study, crude extracts and pure compounds of this plant are used as effective agents in the treatment of depression, osteoporosis, fatigue, rheumatoid arthritis, and infertility due to their antidepressant, anti-osteoporosis, pro-fertility, anti-radiation, and anti-Alzheimer's disease, anti-rheumatoid, anti-fatigue, anti-aging, cardiovascular protective, antioxidation, and immune regulatory and anti-inflammatory activities. That's a lot of different activities. Another study by Li and their team similarly say modern pharmacological experiments have shown that Bajitian has a wide range of pharmacological activities, including antioxidant, analgesic or pain relieving, anti-inflammatory, anti-osteoporosis, antidepressant, and fertility promoting activities. So it can be very useful for those sort of things. Lots of interesting functions. So, Bajitian I'm familiar with. I've used it, occasionally, and I don't get a ton of yang deficient patients, but it certainly is on the list. I'm familiar with it, but I didn't realize it did all this other stuff according to the science. So it's interesting to look at this. It's not how we usually would prescribe it in Chinese medicine, but sometimes it's useful to go, okay, this person, I'm yang tonic, but they're also depressed. Maybe this will help, that sort of thing. Drug-herb interactions. One study mentions a constituent of Bajitian may induce P-glycoprotein and cause an interaction. So this is one of the major targets. So when we talk about drug-herb interactions, we talked about this a couple episodes ago. Drug-herb interactions. There's 4 or 5 major aspects we look at for drug-herb interactions. P-glycoprotein and other transporter proteins is one of those. And P-glycoprotein, what it actually does is it takes things from within the cell and pushes them outside of the cell. And so if it induces P-glycoprotein, what that means is drugs won't necessarily stay in the cell where they have their actions if it is inducing it, or will do it less so than they would otherwise. So that can cause a drug-herb interaction. It was really the only study that I saw, and I'm not a huge fan of looking at a specific constituent and saying it does this, so therefore we have to be worried, because there may be lots of other constituents that do the exact opposite and balances it out. And I feel like if you are too specific on some of these things, you're kind of missing the point of having a whole food in terms of an herb. But at least for us to be aware that it may have some P-glycoprotein interactions can increase the risk of a drug-herb interaction with this herb. A literature search did not yield any evidence of cytochrome P450 interactions or other novel drug-herb interactions. So doesn't look like cytochrome P450 interactions. Again, I saw a study or two that said there might be some of certain constituents, but it didn't seem very strong evidence, and I didn't feel like I should include it here, and I didn't feel like it was strong enough even to mention it, and then I mentioned it. So there you go. So there's a little bit of a risk of drug-herb interactions, but I don't think it's very strong. One of the sources that I really like, by the way, for looking at drug-herb interactions and just overall the safety of an herb is a book called the American Herbal Product Association's Botanical Safety Handbook, a very large book that has most herbs in it. It's quite thorough and has a lot of Chinese herbs. It's a lot of them, but it does not have an entry on this herb. And that tells me two things. Number one, it tells me it's not one of the most commonly used Chinese herbs. I mean, it has hundreds, I think, of Chinese herbs. I mean, it's pretty good with Chinese herbs. So when I find a Chinese herb is not in this book, it usually means that herb is not a very commonly used herb in general. So that's one thing it tells us. And the other thing is it doesn't give us any guidance as to whether there are drug-herb interactions issues that we need to be worried about with this particular herb. So what are some of the concerns? Every herb has concerns. So what are some of the concerns of this herb? So Bensky and his team note several concerns with Baji Tian. Under the heading of cautions and contraindications, they say it is contraindicated in those with either damp heat or heat from yin deficiency, as well as those with urinary difficulty. Under the heading of traditional contraindications, they quote the commentary on the Divine Husbandman's classic of Materia Medica, the Shenhan Bensao Jing Shu, which was written in 1625, so that's 1400 years after the Divine Husbandman's classic of Materia Medica was written. Its standard contraindications are disorders such as overabundant or blazing of ministerial fire, blood in the stool, bitter taste, red and painful eyes, restless irritability, or dry constipation. According to some traditional sources, this herb antagonizes Salvia myricerae radix or Dan Shen. Bensky also lists several adulterant species. That's useful because sometimes it may be with the adulterant species they may be misidentified and sold as Baji Tian. Sometimes they're cheaper, and so miscreants will sell them instead of the traditional Baji Tian. I like it when Bensky lists those. It's not something we get into too much in this podcast, but it is something to be aware of, that there are potential adulterant species. So I'm at least mentioning that here as a concern. Chen and Chen say Baji Tian should not be used as a single herb remedy for patients with yin deficient fire. Should be combined with yin, jing, or essence, or blood tonics. This herb is contraindicated in patients with damp heat. Brand Wiseman say it is contraindicated in effulgent yin vacuity fire. So basically very similar to what Chen and Chen does in slightly different language. And as already mentioned, the American Herbal Products Association's Botanical Safety Handbook does not have an entry on this herb. I usually love, one of the reasons why I like this particular book, both for drug-herb interactions and for safety, is they have ratings. Like they have a safety rating and they have an interaction rating, and they've done some of the legwork and kind of congealed all the different studies and said, okay, it's safe, or it's for intended uses, or it's not safe, or whatever. And without that, it's a shame. But again, this doesn't have it in that text. And that's it. We're wrapping up. Thank you. So summary, we started today by looking at what do herbs, we started looking, let me start over. We started today by looking at why do herbs work and discuss coherent coupling and plant-human coalitions. Then we looked at the Chinese herb Baji Tian, or morinda root. We saw how useful this herb is in mildly treating yang vacuity, as well as supporting the bones and sinews. And we spent a good amount of time discussing its intricacies, including preparations, cautions, and comparisons to other herbs. With that, we conclude another exploration of a useful Chinese herb. I don't know about you, I learned a lot about Baji Tian, and that's why I do this. It's awesome. I get to share it. In our next episode, we will be looking at another traditional Western herb, as well as another Western herb with culinary uses, and that herb is horseradish. As always, we will do our deep dive into this herb and look at its traditional uses. Does it have any Chinese medical functions, and its preparation, interactions, and cautions, as well as interactions. Oh, we said interactions. It's right there. And as usual, we will be adding something a little bit different. Don't know what it is yet. We're going to find out. It is going to be another interesting spelunking mission into the depths of herbdom. Please join us. I had some fun with that. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you listening. If you like this podcast, please do us a humongous favor. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app. We appreciate it. We thank you for listening. We thank you for considering subscribing. And you can get this course as continuing education and get more info on my upcoming integrative nutrition series at www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org. That's www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org. You can always get in touch with me at Dr. Greg at spurbsherbs.com or at our website, www.spurbsherbs.com, SPERBSHERBS. I always read that out. I always do the letters on that because I taught Chinese medicine and herbs in Australia. And every time I would say herb, someone in my class would raise their hand and go, I wasn't a doctor at that point. So Mr. Sperber, do you mean herb? And of course I'd be cheeky and say, no, I meant herb. So it's just difference. The Brits pronounce the H. We do not. So the Americans do not generally. And with that, we have our bibliography. And as usual, there's quite a good one. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. The proceeding was presented by Dr. Greg Sperber. We would like to thank Janelle for all her support and everybody else who contributed to this program.
Janelle.
Timothy Dobbins.
Roger
Campbell.